So here we are on this afternoon heading into the darkest season of a particularly dark year. So our talk for today, The Shadow and Integrating Our Spiritual and Psychological Work, is a particularly timely, if not prescient, topic. From where we stand, it would be easy to drift into a notion that all demons that we had to cast out were external political demons. There's certainly plenty of work to be done in that arena. But we ignore at our own peril the demons within. Carl Jung in his lifetime saw the world torn apart by 2 world wars, and his prescription for the destructive power of mass movements was to look inside. So I hope that our club can continue to provide fellowship for all those who would venture to look inside. Our speaker this afternoon is David Richo, the author of at least 20 books. He is a psychotherapist and a teacher who has led workshops at such places as Esalen and Spirit Rock. But my introduction of him can only go so far, so I will ask his longtime friend, Brother Jude Hill, Minister Provincial of the Society of St. Francis and longtime APC member, to say a few personal words on his behalf.
And before you do, Jude, there's several seats up front. If you would like to come in.
I'll find somewhere.
All right.
It's a joy to be able to welcome David today because I too am one of his fans. How did I come to meet him? I used to work on the San Francisco Night Ministry, which is an organisation that's still going in San Francisco. There's a priest or a minister on the streets every night of the year from 10 o'clock at night till 5, 6 in the morning, going around all the places where people are in crisis, and a phone counselling line where people can phone who are in distress in the night, and we get sent to people's places. But we also just go around the place wherever people gather. So we go to bars, to clubs, to brothels, to supermarkets, anywhere where there are people in the night, and just be available to talk, to see if they want to have conversations. We don't talk religion, we don't talk anything like that, we just want to be there for people who are in need. And I used to work every Saturday night and Sunday night. And one of my places was, I don't remember, we used to have things called bookstores in the city. And there was Borders bookstore in Union Square, a huge bookstore. And they had a cafe in Borders, and I used to go there, and I was there from 10 o'clock till midnight, and people knew I would be there. They'd come and talk to me, ask me questions and things, and if Borders had somebody in distress, they would phone and make sure I was there. And I left the place about 10 to 5 to midnight to be going around the city and on my route that I normally took. And I was coming down the escalator, this is 2001, coming down the escalator towards the checkout desk and the door, and suddenly on the table in front of me was this display, and it was a book, and it had a picture of Our Lady on it, of Mary the Virgin, and it said, Mary Within. A Jungian looks at her titles, and I thought, hell's bells, I've got to get that. So I quickly grabbed the book and rushed to the desk before it closed off. And it was by this man called David Richo. So I took it home, and the next day I read it from start to cover to cover. He said he lived in San Francisco. I thought, well, I'm be interested to meet this man, but no, somebody as famous as that I could never meet or have anything to do with. At that point, we had a brother from England visiting from our house in England, and he said to me the next day, I'm going to this book reading tonight, you should come with me. It's by this man called David Richo, who's in England. But I couldn't because I was working, I was seeing patients that night, so I couldn't go. So I said, well, find out if he's doing any more talks. So he came back the next day, and I said, how did the talk go? He said, oh, it was wonderful, he said. And he gave me this card, and he said, give him a ring and meet up and talk. I thought, I can't talk to somebody like that, you know. I'm a peasant from England, you know. Somebody famous like that. So I just left it. And then after a few weeks, he got in touch with me and said, let's meet. So we met in the Castro, in a breakfast place, and we had breakfast together. And it reminded me of that section where, you know, Jung talks about meeting with Freud. They just talked and talked and talked, and there was this click, this engagement. And that was 2001. And since then, we've met when he's in San Francisco. He comes to our house to Mass every week, and he also we go out for lunch, a couple of times a month, and we also meet and talk about the latest things that are going on. We send quotes back and forth, and when I have trouble with any of my patients, I need some supervision, I go and talk to David, and we're really steeped together in the whole Jungian thing, it's really good to have somebody. I'm a Jungian analyst, and so I need some supervision some of the time so I don't get too inflated. He really brings me down to earth. So it's really good. So we've been this great friends ever since. And we were talking about his books, and I mean, he just amazes me completely, because the book that he first wrote of, which is Mary Within, is now called When Mary Becomes Cosmic, which is a new one, which is about the feminine. And so the books sort of come. You are not what you think. This was my favourite. Catholic means universal for a Christian, which is wonderful. This is brilliant. I make all the novices in our community read this. When the past is present. This is how all the stuff from your past repeats over again in the present. In all the relationships that you have, in absolutely everything, from the greengrocer down to your family and your friends. Unexpected miracles, synchronicity. All the synchronicities, which is how I came to meet him. The 5 longings, what we've always wanted, but really we've got, but we've just never acknowledged it. Coming home to who we are, being able to accept who we are. How to be an adult in relationships. I give that to all my patients, and then they divorce the spouses. How to be an adult, because lots of us really are not. This is a wonderful one, which is called The Sacred Heart of the World. And this is about, he's taking the old model of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and looking at it in a completely new way. In this very powerful spiritual way. The 5 things that we cannot change. We always want to change things, but there's some things we just can't change. How to be an adult in love. And then we've got how to be an adult in faith and spirituality. And then those of you who have heard of Teilhard de Chardin, the great priest who died in 62, I think it was, or 50s something, who was a great paleontologist who found God in creation. And Jung wrote about Teilhard de Chardin and said, this man is really godly, but his writings are so difficult to read. He's taken Teilhard de Chardin and made it really understandable in this wonderful book, which is called Everything Ablaze. And then his book on the shadow, which I didn't bring a copy of, but so they go on. All these books, if you look on the website, they're all there. This man who had got a bachelor's degree, his master's, his doctorate, he's a Roman Catholic priest, he's lived and worked, taught at all these colleges in San Francisco and in Santa Barbara, and yet he reminds me of somebody who is just happy doing the ordinary things of life, and who finds God and finds the spirituality and the Jungian model to apply to absolutely everything in all he's doing. And there's an incredible humility about him. And I hope that that's what will come through in our talk today, and that you can ask him anything and not feel stupid, because none of the questions that you ask are stupid. They're all about you and about us and about our unconscious. And as we were saying on the way over, the thing about the unconscious is, somebody once said to Jung, tell us about the unconscious, and he said, I can't, because it's unconscious. That's the whole point. And so a lot of his work is helping us to discover how to look at the unconscious and see into it. And I know that today's talk will be absolutely brilliant, and you get a lot from it, and from his books, which I do encourage you to read. So thank you, Father, for being here and for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Since we're going into a topic that has to do with the darkness that's in us and in the world around us, I think it's important to begin with a spiritual sense of where we are and what we're really about. And I tried to put this together in this affirmation that's also like a prayer. You notice that, and you all have a copy of it, and you notice that the third word is show, which is the opposite of shadow. So when we begin this way, we place ourselves in under the protection of the power of love, which is real only when shown. And the shadow is real only when hidden. So if you follow along, I'll begin with reading it, and then we'll kind of just walk through it briefly as our introduction to our topic. May I show all the love I have in any way I can, today and all the time, to everyone, including me, since love is what we are and why we're here. May all that happens to me be an opportunity of grace to love much more and fear much less. I dedicate myself to make this world one sacred heart of love. So, beginning with this sense of a calming or a sense of myself as here to show something that's in me. What is this that's in me? What is this enduring capacity? It's the chance to love. And how do I want to show it? Limitlessly, in any way I can. And when would I show it? Right here and now, today, and all the time. To whom would I show it? Again, limitless. It'll be to everyone, including myself. And that won't be considered selfish. That'll just be considered part of humanity itself. I'm a member of humanity, so is everyone else. And this love extends to all of us. And why would I be doing this? Because love is if you think of love as a caring connection, then at our deepest level, even as social beings, without a spiritual consciousness, there's always the sense that we are connected. And when that connection has caring and compassion with it, that's called love. So at our deepest self, we are love. And why are we here? We're here to join the evolutionary impulse of the whole universe. What direction is it moving in? More and more connection. That would be the equivalent of love. Now I'm placing an intention, and my intention is that in the course of the day when things happen to me, instead of thinking of them only as happenings, I would like to think of them in a new way. That everything that happens is an opportunity that's given to me by grace, the gift dimension of the universe. And Jung talks about the archetype of grace as synchronicity. People will come along who help me show the love that's in me, or challenge my shadow so that I see that at times I make decisions that aren't so loving. So I want everything that happens to be some kind of an opportunity. Opportunity for what? It'll be to love more than I ever have before, and to fear less than I ever have before. And I end with a dedication. I'm dedicating myself to go beyond just my own personal work. I actually want to make the whole world one sacred heart of love. something like the Buddhist dedication, may I save all beings. It's the same idea. Obviously, it's impossible to do in person. But when I place this kind of an intention, I am taking a stand in the world as somebody who has some love to give. And I decided not to limit it to my near and dear, which is what's natural to all of us, but to find a way to care about the whole planet. God so loved the world. And the Greek word he used for world is cosmos. God so loved the whole cosmos that he made a connection with us. And calling the world a sacred heart of love makes the world intimate to me and part of my spirituality. Spirituality is in the sacred, the intimate's in the heart. Beginning this way, and I use this as part of my prayer at the beginning of the day, even beginning the day with this, or put it on your fridge and go to it from time to time, it awakens a consciousness of something that may have been hidden inside of us, which we will soon see, that Jung calls the positive shadow. We hide the bigness of our love as much as we hide the bigness of our evil. So this is meant to activate that love. And I really believe that this style can become our lifestyle. Any immediate reactions or reflections to anything on here? It's a very tender entry into our topic. So I'm glad we're doing this.
I had one idea.
John?
I've heard the positive aspects of the shadow referred to as the bright shadow. I
Okay.
like that. I like.
Yeah. Good.
Why do you think it's hidden? I mean, I can sort of more understand hiding something that feels evil you don't want to identify with, but why hide something so positive?
I'm going to go into that, but I'll just put it in the sequence that it goes with. But I'll definitely answer. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I have some extra ones of these on that table when near the door. You're welcome to help yourself. Also, the book that I have on this topic is called Shadow Dance, and there's my website, daverico.com. So let's begin with our topic, which comes to us thanks to Jung, and this is from Book 9 of the Collected Works. But I notice you'll see it in pretty much all the various volumes. The reason it's called shadow is because a shadow happens when something is in the way of the light. So light trying to come through, and something is in the way of it. In other words, it's, shall we say, something that's unclear, dark, and dark in our context does not mean complexion. Dark means not conscious. So this shadow is unconscious. And from Jung's point of view, it has two, shall we say, ingredients. Positive shadow refers to all the wonderful virtues and empowering qualities that humans might have. And that might also include talents. Negatively, it has to do with all the unacceptable traits in our personality and impulses that we are ashamed to acknowledge. And Jung's basic point is that from the very beginning of life, we notice certain capacities and potentials. And something tells us, either from family or society or church or whatever influences are weighing in on the formation of yourself. It's dangerous to show certain parts of you. Some of these parts are even positive and some are negative. Certainly understandable that those who care about us would want to not have us show these unacceptable traits. Hard to understand why these wonderful qualities might look dangerous to others. And we'll go to what that's about shortly. But first, let's just acknowledge that at some point we disowned, just as a father disowns a certain child from his or his will, we disowned parts of ourselves. And these parts went into the unconscious. Remember Freud's very helpful image of the unconscious. He said it's like an iceberg. Just the top tip is what we're conscious of, and all the rest of who we are on the body-mind level is in the unconscious, hidden under the chill and forbidding waves. And Jung proposed, and this is part of the individuation process, how you become the wholeness that you really are, that we need to bring facts and qualities up from the unconscious into the light of consciousness. That would be the equivalent of a psychologically healthy life purpose. And some of what's in the unconscious is the disowned shadow. So all of the shadow is unconscious, but not all of the unconscious is shadow. Some of the things that are in the unconscious are just simply repressed memories. As opposed to something that looked dangerous, so it had to be disowned. Joseph Campbell has such a nice way of talking about the positive shadow. He says, these are the gifts we never dared to open. These wonderful qualities in us, we just couldn't open very easily. Now, since I will come back to all this, but first I want to go into another feature of our topic. As you know from Jung's point of view, the psyche does not consist only of our personal story. Psyche, Greek word for soul, S-O-U-L. From Freud's point of view, the unconscious part of us has to do with repressed memories from our childhood, although he also acknowledges that there's a collective side, but not as much as Jung does. So within this psyche, part of which is, the biggest part of which is unconscious, we have a personal dimension. And in addition, we have something he eventually called the collective psyche. I have inherited qualities from my family, and I have a personality that's very much influenced by my family members. So all of that is in my personal unconscious psyche. It's something like a family album. Having pictures in it that I haven't ever really looked at. But as a human, I also have a heritage, not from my specific family members, but from the entire collection of all humans, going all the way back to the beginning of the human journey on this planet. And in this collective part of me, this collective unconscious, it's not a family album, nothing so limited. It's something much bigger. It's, shall we say, the entire library of human history. I even inherited that. I inherited personally, and I inherited collectively. Then it would stand to reason that this shadow side that we've just been talking about, and we put it over into this half of the story, we could also say that this shadow side, positive and negative, not only has to do with who we are individually, but also who we are collectively as humans. And I'm going to come back to this and show some of the specific examples of the light and dark in our human collective. A light and dark that doesn't go away and that we didn't cause. Original sin. The church's attempt to understand where this darkness came from, since we obviously didn't cause it on our own. So we have light and dark in our personal life, and light and dark in our collective connection to our gene pool. Questions about this part? So I'll ask for questions as we go along instead of just at the end.
I'm thinking about the definition of evil,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, the infliction of suffering consciously or even including unconsciously.
Mhm.
But does contrasting good and evil, that's a duality.
Yeah.
So if we go to compassion and understanding the roots of evil in terms of the family album and the library, so I'm kind of struggling with that a little bit in terms of
That there's
saying
a
that
dark
it's
side
evil.
in all of it.
In defining it as evil, if we go to compassion and deeply, deeply understanding the roots and the causes. But I mean, suffering and exists. But it's that contrast of love and evil and the suggested duality of it, and how that relates to deep, deep, deep understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember that from our Jungian point of view, we are composed of a combination of opposites. So everyone who loves also contains hate. Everybody who acts with goodness also contains the capacity for evil. If evil is thought of as you defined it, whatever it has to do with the attempt to hurt and harm others, or even yourself. And maybe more of this will become clear as we go on with the topic, especially when I talk about the collective shadow, where we meet up with pure evil.
So your definition of evil is?
I think I would say it has to do with the worst dimension of human choice making, as in our personal side. But in the collective side, it seems like it also has kind of a life of its own at times. Jude, would you add anything to that? About the evil part?
I think it is that autonomous power that sometimes takes over us personally, that we acknowledge that we've all got capacity within us for committing things. Thomas Merton says, we went back to his hut in the garden once, having asked the abbot permission to do something, and the abbot said no under no circumstances. And on the way back to his hut, he plotted the murder of the abbot. And he said he got back and he realised when he sat down, he had the capacity within him to commit murder. And he said he realised we've all got the capacity within us to do all of those. As long as we can acknowledge that, then we have control over them. The problem is the powerful, the collective, which is where, as one Francis says, we try to acknowledge that exists, but we don't integrate it, we acknowledge it, because then it can take over us, as in the wars and other situations that David's going to talk about, and when we can become subsumed and collude with the collective evil, and we can act it out and project it onto other people. We can't, and we can make the other the enemy, which is what we do, and then it's all right to destroy them. And that's where we've got to separate out and say, this is my stuff. This is telling, and I think when you see something, you have some strong reaction to something, or you find something difficult or something, it's a learning experience, because you could say, what is this about? What is this telling me about me that I've never faced before? That I've got this capacity within me. So I think that it is an opportunity for growth. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess rejecting evil with love.
Yes, yeah, and not rejecting yourself though, in the middle of it, yeah.
So if goodness had to do with connection, evil has to do with separation.
Mm-hmm.
I
You
would
have
add,
to say somebody's less than human, and then you can perpetrate evil against them. Not from a goodness place, because everybody's connected and united.
I was just going to say that I think that evil is like so many things, ultimately undefinable.
Yeah.
But also I think we get into trouble, or we get nearer to evil when we're so lopsided for the good.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it shows up.
Yeah.
Because the issue of
Screams.
rejection.
Well, because we're so good. We want to be nice. We want to be the right thing. We want to be, in spite of being perfect. And that when we get close to that edge, then the other side will compensate just as extremely as we are in the good.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I've learned from you. Would
What-
you?
What about
Compensate,
Job?
because the psyche's always looking for equilibrium.
What about Job?
Job is the book in the Bible that confronts the topic of evil in a deeper way than most of the rest of the Hebrew Bible. And Job realizes that the terrible things happening to him do not compute. Why has he lost his home, his family, his property, his cattle, even his own health, when he had done nothing wrong? And so he confronts God with that question. And God assures him, no, it wasn't that you did something wrong. It's more like you're being tested. And it opens the question of how evil is a fact, a given of our human experience. And sometimes it hits us when we're totally innocent. And if we're still tied to the old belief that happiness is a reward and suffering is a penalty, then we would miss the whole point. Because anything can happen to anybody. Well, I want to go on to this poem by Emily Dickinson. She lived during the Civil War, but she has such a clear sense of the entire topic of the shadow. And it's expressed in this poem called "One Need Not Be a Chamber." I think all the words in it are understandable, but I will still go back after I share the poem and kind of walk through it with you. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place. Far safer of a midnight meeting, external ghost, than the interior confronting that cooler host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones a chase, than unarmed one self-encounter in a lonesome place. Ourself behind ourself concealed should startle most. Assassin hid in our apartment be horror's least. The body borrows a revolver and bolts the door, or looking a superior specter or more. Specter, ghost, haunted house. What is this haunted house? My own body mind. There's something in me more dangerous than a prowler who has come to harm me. That is the concealed self. Ourself behind ourself, concealed. That's what should startle me the most, she's saying. Here I am fearing something external, when actually what's inside me is much more threatening if I keep it concealed. The whole thing hinges on the word conceal. So we began with, may I show, may I reveal. No danger there. May I reveal, even in the prayer that we're familiar with in the Judeo-Christian tradition. I confess that I'm a sinner. Now I am revealing my dark side. And when I conceal it, it turns into something that wallops me with my own energy. That's what the shadow's about as we go into it more deeply. I'm clobbering myself with energy that actually belongs to me. And one of the ways that I do this is a way that also helps us see a way out of it all, namely projection. So let's take a quick look at what we mean by projection. Let's start with the word itself. Pro in Latin means forward or ahead. And this is the passive voice of a word that means throw. So projection is, there's something in me that I don't want to face, so I throw it ahead. I throw it into you. And Jung has a wonderful way of describing it in just one sentence. Projection makes the world into a replica of my own unknown face. Projection makes others, or the world, replicas, lookalikes of my unknown face, not my known face. So I have an unknown face. That unknown face is called my shadow, my personal unknown face. And as a human, I also have a collective unknown face, although history has shown us so many times what's in this unknown face is not unknown anymore. I'll go into that shortly. So instead of our being stuck with having a shadow that contains positive and negative features, we have an actual device, psychological device, that shows us what's hidden. So here it is, unconscious in itself, but there's a little clue as to what's in each of them. And that clue is projection. It would be good if you could shut off your cell phones. When I project greatness onto someone and admire him or her, very strongly, the strong admiration is something from my unknown face that I see in the face of the other. When I strongly dislike, hate, or am repulsed by someone. It's the psyche's way of pointing. It's a pointer to the negative shadow in me. Now for Freud, projection is a defense mechanism by which we avoid our anxiety. But look, for Jung, it's very positive. It's a road into, it's an on-ramp into your shadow. The people I admire strongly, especially of my same sex, or the people that I strongly dislike, especially of my same sex, could be showing me what I have inside myself. So I eat, sleep, and drink Dalai Lama. I so admire him. He's just so perfect. I can't even believe he has a shadow, which all humans have. And I'm finding out that there's some peacemaking quality in me that I have not yet fully expressed, and that he's showing me what it would look like if I did, and the suffering that would go with it. And I eat, sleep, and drink Hitler, and I just can't get out of my mind what a horrible person he was, and so forth. And is there something in me that's divisive, hurtful, prejudiced, violent, and so forth? Yes, there is. I mean, it's in all of us. And they act out what we don't dare admit. Now, why would we have this projection experience? It's very simple. There's something in the psyche that wants to complete itself, that wants to go to individuation, that wants to integrate. In the course of the heroic journey, there's something in the whole universe and its evolutionary arc in the direction of consciousness that's trying to help us in the course of our story to go from ignorance to wisdom. This helps us get there because it shows us qualities that we didn't know we had. Simple example. When Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz arrives in Oz, she doesn't realize that the slippers that suddenly appeared on her feet have a special power. She doesn't realize that she herself has a special power. She has to go through the journey experience, meet up with the dark side, represented by the witch and her army of flying monkeys. She has to meet up with the kindly assisting forces, the three friends. After she goes through all these meetings and experiences, she stands before the good witch who represents the collective positive shadow. And the good witch says to her, "You had the power all along. It's in two things. One, you yourself can say there's no place like home, and you were given the special slippers. They have the power, when clicked together, to bring somebody back to Kansas. So you always had it. It's just you didn't realize it." So how do we get to realize the full picture, the known face of ourselves? Is through others. The ones you strongly admire or envy show you your positive qualities. The ones you turn against and hate show you your negative capacities. You have thrown forward into them the hidden features of yourself. So from this point of view, projection helps us. And then the royal road into the unconscious and into the dark side is, of course, dreams. The characters in the dreams that you admire and who seem to be helpful to you of the same sex, they are the ones who show you the positive shadow. And the scary characters in the dream show you your negative. Or another way of saying it is, it's not a cruel joke that we were made this way. We could have been made with positive and negative qualities that will never come into the light of day. But look, instead we were also endowed with mechanisms such as projection, dreams, sudden impulsive actions that are either positive or negative. They clue you into, they declare that there's something hidden positively or something hidden negatively. Everybody follow so far? I'm going to go on to why would we hide what's positive, answer your question. But first, I'm checking in again. Anybody have questions about this part?
That would be good.
Everybody following so far? Yeah.
I just wonder, you make a point of saying the person of the same gender when you're talking about the shadow.
Mhm.
And are you saying that they don't cross over, or?
Then it would be anima work for men or animus work for women. I said that Richo, who mentions the same gender idea, and he also says that the first part of the work is meeting the shadow, dancing with it a little bit, so you get to be aware of each other's rhythms and finding ways to integrate, which I will come to. Because integrating the positive side is very obvious. Activate those wonderful gifts that are in you. But integrating the negative side is more challenging, but I'm going to go there.
Yeah, Jake.
Jake.
Could you just repeat how you said dreams play a factor in your chart?
Yeah, the dreams bring in characters who represent split off features of your own personality, which is what the shadow is. It's unintegrated, it's split off, but yet you're carrying it around. And the characters in your dreams show you qualities or features of yourself, potentials, that you may not have been aware of. And in that sense, they really help you.
Do they always help you?
Well, Jung suggests that when you have a dream, you, of course, attempt to remember it, and then you engage in a process that he calls active imagination. So next morning, while you're lying there in bed and you're thinking of the particular dream that you had, you could start to talk directly to each of the characters and ask him or her, what did you come to tell me? What are you trying to say to me tell me something about yourself, and then you could take the part of the one that you dreamed about and say something to yourself. Kind of go back and forth. He suggests writing it out, but you could certainly start with thinking, kind of entertaining this in your own mind. And then the dreams bring you into this hidden part of yourself. How did it wind up getting hidden? It was too dangerous for it to appear in the light of day. Remember in the Garden of Eden, when God said to Adam, "Why are you people dressed?" They were nude and then they covered themselves. God is questioning, what's happening here. Famous words of Adam. "I was afraid, so I hid myself." It says it all. I was afraid, so I hid myself. Or another way of saying it is, I was afraid, so I threw into my shadow container anything that might get me into trouble. What kind of trouble? The trouble that comes when people see you as you really are. When these people only want to see what they think is right. And that may be the kind of people we were brought up with. We're not holding it against them now, but we're noticing that there were probably things about us that early on met up with rejection. And it would be scary to be rejected by the ones who are our caretakers, since our very survival depends upon them. So we would start stuffing down, I better not show this part, because they may not like it. And all of that goes into your shadow. Unfortunately, some of it is very positive. But even the negative parts, as we'll see, have creative value. Other questions about this? Elaine?
Could you talk a little more about sudden impulses?
You suddenly do something that's out of character, and you say, where did that come from? God, do I have a mean streak? Or, gee, that was so nice of me. I'm not usually like that. God, I was suddenly so generous, or whatever. So you're tricked into showing something about yourself that you thought needed to be hidden. Now, to go back to a question that came up before, why would we certainly understand why we would hide our negative side, but why would we hide our positive side? So I'll begin my answer with another poem by Emily Dickinson. This one's fairly easy to understand. I'll comment on it anyway. We never know how high we are till we are asked to rise. And then, if we be true to plan, our stature touch the skies. The heroism we recite would be a normal thing, did not ourselves the cubits warp for fear to be a king. So, our true stature is as big as the ones we admire. I'm just as big as Abraham Lincoln. But I was afraid to know that. I was afraid to believe that I had power like that, or even any power. The fear of power which is also the origin of guilt in many cases. I'll give an example. Harkens back to the positive shadow. I was afraid to be this big. I thought, I don't want to stand out. I want to be like everybody else. So I'm not going to show the bigness of my talents, virtues, gifts, etc. So, just one last thing on the question. What did I promise to go back to?
Fear of power being the origin of guilt.
Oh, guilt, yeah. Let's say the church says that a certain sexual act is sinful. A pleasure, of course, a pleasurable act. And you feel guilty when you do this. And the church has said, well, that's a sin, so then you feel guilty. You think it's guilt about pleasure, but it isn't really. It's guilt that you took the power into your own hands. No pun intended. You did something that the big powers said you shouldn't do. You stood up equally to them and said, no, I have control over my own body and can do with it what I want to do. That's a powerful statement. And the fear of that kind of power is what keeps us guilty. It's not about pleasure. We're guilty because we took the power into our own hands. I'm remembering the first lines of one of Emily Dickinson's other poems. I took my power in my hand and went against the world. It was not so much as David had, but I was twice as bold. David and Goliath. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around this because you're talking about guilt being the part of power that we don't access, or we don't show, we don't tap. Is guilt the only thing that stops us from showing power?
Guilt, shame, fear, inhibition, repression, strict obedience to voices that basically keep us down.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is, well, I have a full self, and as of now, I'm showing one little sliver of it. And Jung is proposing that we'll never be able to show it all. But we could at least bring a few things up that we had repudiated about ourselves and let them be seen. And when we do this, we expand our personality and our presence in the world. Is that what I've been afraid of all along? Rhetorical question. Let's have one last question and then we'll take our break. Karen?
I don't know if this is relative or not, but I'm thinking about life circumstances and historical context. Like, if I was born a woman during a period of time where people kill women for saying certain things, for example, or whatever, how does that play into...
That would figure in, very much so. It's very culturally sensitive, it's gender sensitive. There's even it's like there would be a different kind of shadow you would have if you were brought up in one religion instead of another. It's even sensitive to that. There were so many forces that were containing us positively in a nurturance, kindly environment. No problem there. But part of the price of being held that way might have been give up qualities that don't fit here. You cannot have gender issues living in this particular town. If you want that, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, no problem. But here it doesn't go. So that would have to be submerged. So a big, wonderful thing about these liberation movements that have been happening over the past 2 or 3 decades, people have been able to release some of their hidden things, some of their hidden qualities. Jude, were you going to make a comment?
I suppose one of the other defences, the ego's task is to keep us the same person we were today, we were yesterday, we are tomorrow. And some people call the ego the loyal warrior. It maintains our sanity and our continuity. If we change in any way, the ego has failed in its task. So it doesn't want us to change. So all these things that we're talking about which don't want us to change collude with the ego, which also tries to stop us changing. So you've got an unconscious and a conscious battle going on as well, because if we change, the ego's lost its power, it's failed in its task. So it's a real difficult battle sometimes to allow the positive to come up, to allow ourselves to change, to integrate, because the ego says, no, don't change, because if you do that, you'll have to go to something new, and that's painful and difficult. You'll have to change the whole of your life, the way you think. All your life will change. Stay the way you are, the boring old fart you are today, and it'll all be all right. That's what, the ego doesn't want you to change and grow, because it's trying to make you the same person you are. So there's always a battle going on inside of you to grow and become whole and individuated, with the part of you that says, no, don't do that, stay how you are. It's easier, it's safer. It's like when you get offered a new job, perhaps in the company, or a new company says, come and do this job, this higher powered job. Do you want to do that? Because it'd be difficult to change, or do you just want to stay where you are? There's a part of you always wants to stay where you are. And the morning you're going to start the new job, you say, why did I do this? Why did I do this? I should have stayed where I was happy there. That battle of the unconscious inside of you is always going to be going on.
I'm so glad you brought that in, because that's so true. And it reminds you of the old cartoon of Pogo. We have met the enemy, and he is us. All right, well, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back to the next part. Just to say one more thing on the topic of projection. Sure. People trigger you, and sometimes there's projection in how you're triggered, or people excite you and activate your admiration and so forth, and that can always happen. Versus things happen, people act certain ways, or people come across as either admirable or repulsive, but you simply take it as information. When you simply are informed by how others are, it's probably not your shadow. It's your shadow when you get strongly triggered, excited, overwhelmed, because the archetype reveals itself in strong emotion. So when you have strong emotion, that's probably your shadow. But if it's simple information, I'll give an example, then it may not be your shadow. Or if, for instance, you see some terrible injustice and you do feel excited, and you do have strong emotion, and it leads you to join in protest or to take a stand, that also is not necessarily your shadow. It's shadow when it happens across the board. Every time I see a controlling person, I get very upset and competitive. Now you're looking at your shadow. Or, I'm giving an example, or, yeah, I noticed this friend of mine is controlling, but no problem, let her be that way, let him be that way. I'm not gonna be controlled. I notice it without blame. When that happens, probably not your shadow. You're probably not controlling. Everybody see the difference? Okay. Okay. Anybody have leftover questions from before? Okay, so let's go on to a quick look at the negative and positive shadow and how it shows itself. So in our personal shadow, we might have some negative qualities, capacities, qualities that we don't dare admit are in us. And I use the what are called the 3 poisons of enlightenment in Buddhism. But I could have used the Christian version, which would be the 7 deadly sins. Arrogance, violence, envy, gluttony,
Lust.
Greed,
Hatred, lust.
lust. I wouldn't include that. Perfectly okay.
That's one that works.
Well,
Revenge.
let's skip that. No. It's,
Sloth, that's a form of greed.
Sloth, yeah.
Sloth.
Sloth.
Oh, sloth.
Sloth, yeah.
Yeah, laziness. So, these are examples of personal qualities that someone could have and could be hidden. For instance, every time I do a donation, I make sure everybody knows that I'm doing it. And I'm not admitting that I might not be as generous as I thought I was. Then we also notice that in the collective of humanity, there are certain examples of evil that keep showing up over and over. In fact, these 5 that I mentioned, which are 5 of many, are all happening right this minute, somewhere on this planet, or even closer than we think. So today's the 100th anniversary of such a meaningless war, World War I, where it seemed as if the whole world was poised to engage in war. And when the Archduke was assassinated, that gave them the reason to start World War I. And it only led to World War II. So, and then after II comes all the other wars that we've engaged in and that countries engage in. And as long as there's nationalism, there'll always be war. So war seems to be, war making, war orientation, seems to be part of the collective human experience. Also torture, slavery, hate crimes against people who are different from you, and genocide. And they happen over and over again, even in the Garden of, not in the Garden of Eden, even in our first brothers, Cain and Abel, one killed the other. So there was something murderous in us that
we see over and over again. And these seem to be features of our human story. The belief that someday there will be a new kind of world in which there won't be a dark side is a denial of the shadow. And we never have seen a human series of events that don't include what we're looking at here. So we don't want to think to ourselves, well, this is all temporary and someday it's all going to be happiness and light. It isn't really like that, since we are a combination of opposites. So in addition to having these negative qualities, we also have positive ones. So inside ourselves, positive shadow could be a bigger generosity than we ever have shown, more love than we ever have expressed, a wisdom that we never tapped into. And yes, our collective has war, torture, slavery, hate crimes, and genocide, but it also has peacemakers like Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Dalai Lama and so forth. It also has people who take a stand against torture. It also has Emancipation Proclamation against slavery. It also has loving people who accept others who are not like themselves. And it also has caring for other nations rather than trying to kill them off. And for each of these, there are people who represent and who seem to personify these choices. So if we put Hitler as a personification of genocide, for instance, and war and torture and hate, we also have Mother Teresa, who represents the opposite of those. Everybody follow? So it's not all so pessimistic or scary and negative. It's just that there are certain times in history when the shadow seems to become stronger. Remember what Jesus said at the Last Supper? As Judas was leaving the room, he said, "This is your hour and the power of darkness." In other words, this is the darkness time and I'm going to submit to it. It starts now on Holy Thursday and it's going to go all the way through Holy Saturday. And then on Easter Sunday, it'll be a new experience, one filled with light. These are metaphors and personifications of our own story. And you have to say yes to the dark time when it happens. And try to work with it. I'm going to go to that as one of our topics. How do we make friends with the shadow, and how do we find something creative in this negative side? But a big part of it is to say unconditionally, yes, there will be dark times. And when you do see the darkness in yourself, not to become so discouraged, because you can work with it. You can make friends with it. and you can turn it into an ally. I'll be talking about how to do that. But first, any questions left over?
I just have, ever since you started, I've had this thought about how much I like shadow. I mean, just as a thing in life, as too much sun. And so I keep going back to that. But I also wanted to ask about the dynamic. It seems that it's, for someone to integrate the positive side of the shadow, wouldn't be possible unless they could integrate the negative part of the shadow too. Do you think that's...
You want to work with both sides, and yes,
It's not possible to just say they,
no,
Yeah.
they go together. That's a good point. Okay.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned that if it's conscious, it's not shadow.
Right. Shadow is unconscious, what you don't know about yourself and don't imagine could be there.
Well,
But you do see it very clearly in others.
No, but what about you see it in yourself, but it's not shadow?
No, when you see it in yourself, you're noticing one of your limitations or shortcomings, and then you know you have that to work on. Humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings in the 12-step program. I see my shortcomings because I have done my inventory. And sometimes other people point out your shadow side. I didn't mention that. Maybe that's one of the purposes of relationship. So let's just say a word about this character. First of all, there's a tendency in all of us to personify rather than keep things abstract. So for instance, if I were to say, well, there's a dark side that you have to fight, that will not be as impressive as a big screen with Darth Vader standing there looking at little Luke, who turns out to be his own son. You're going to get it better when you see it as a person. Likewise, is there a redemptive possibility in our human story? You're going to get that better when you see Jesus as some kind of divine presence that brings redemption. So faith helps you confront and enter and get comfort from and graces from divine sources that bring you out of the shadows. But if you were to think of the dark side as a devil, Lucifer is his other name, of course. You would project the dark side, negative shadow, and say there's a big shadow figure that tempts me. Devil made me do it. And he's the one to blame for all the evil in the world. And then there's also well, as you know, one of the Christian traditions is that there was a war in heaven before we were created between Satan, Lucifer, and the archangel Michael. And 1/3 of the angels joined Lucifer, 2/3 joined Michael, there was a battle, and Michael won the battle, and Lucifer was exiled from heaven, thrust down into hell, and he became the what would you call him, the manager of the place? Yeah, Satan, the devil, and hell. And all of this is a way of personifying and turning into a metaphor the negative shadow, showing that there's a quality in it that is also beyond human. And St. Paul himself says, we are doing battle with forces in the air. We're not just doing battle with the Romans who consider us illegals. We're doing battle with dominions and demons that are trying to harm us. And then we also have the St. Michael and the guardian angels who are helping us. And they too would be examples of personification of the positive shadow. Everybody see? Obviously it's up to you. You could believe that these actually exist as angels and they're somehow you can call upon them to help you, no problem. And these you can avoid, lead us not into temptation. Or you can see that they show you that the shadow has a big, mysterious reality that nobody can explain or define or limit. That's what's meant, as far as I can understand it, when we give this big spiritual look to the shadow. Everybody follow? Any questions about this?
Could you say
Of
that
course,
last
I'm of the
sentence?
devil's party when I become possessed by the negative shadow, like a person like Hitler. Remember Jung's distinction. He says we need to relate to the archetypes, one of which is the shadow, not be possessed by them. In medieval times, they thought that there was actually a possession by actual demons. And when you're possessed by the archetype, then you are going to do extreme things. So if Hitler is possessed by the hatred of the Jews, let's say, then you will do terrible things. And he was acting out his own projections. But he had so much power that he could do damage to millions of people. So there's a bigness to the shadow that he reminds us of, and that beliefs like these, there's a devil and there are devil, bad angels and good angels, or there's a devil and there's God, Christ, Holy Spirit, so forth. They can help us see the great mystery of our topic. Susan, you had a comment?
I think you answered it.
Oh, okay. Other questions about this? I don't want to go too far into it. Karen?
I'm just curious about the hierarchy of like something being high up versus down below, you know, sort of like the head versus the feet. There's like negativity associated with what's down below in the earth.
Yes, like the heaven is above and the
Yeah,
hell is underneath.
yeah.
The attic is where we keep the treasures. The cellar is where we keep the junk.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a prejudice. Anybody have ideas like that? I never gave it much thought.
Is it a cultural thing, do you think, or more universal? I don't know.
No, it seems like down is thought of as left. I mean, even a hierarchy. You know, the top dog and the lowly peasants. Feudal times. King is above us. We're below. They're all images of this positive and negative shadow. The only danger in the shadow is to deny it.
I'm still hung up on Job because, I mean, reading Jung,
Answer to Job.
well, I mean, he talks so much about the dark side of God. And, you know, it's not only our own transformation, but it's the transformation of the deity.
Yeah, the God in the God figure in the Bible who engages in punishment and revenge is, of course, an example of a projection of whoever was writing that part of the Bible from his own shadow. I say his because it's written entirely by men. And the ones who wrote about the wonderful forgiveness and unconditional love in God, that's coming from the either recognition of the reality or his own positive shadow. But as long as you believe that there's a God who engages in eternal torture, then you have a God that comes from a very negative projection. Still, to believe that there's a hell is in itself a projection of the negative shadow. Because what you're basically saying is, I don't want to be the one who punishes all those bad people, but God will do it for me. It reminds me of Anne Lamott's wonderful statement. Most of us have a God who hates the same people we do. So let him hate them and let him torture them forever, and I'm nice and clean over here. Just to believe in hell could be itself a sign of a part of your own shadow, as opposed to Origen, O-R-I-G-E-N, 2nd century Christian theologian, who said, at the consummation of history, all will be saved because God's love is so strong it couldn't allow for a hell. And in our own tradition, we have he descended into hell. He went into the place of darkness and brought the light there. It's an all-forgiving kind of experience. So you could have that kind of a God, all-forgiving, God is love. Or you could have the one who separates the sheep from the goats and who casts the goats into eternal fire and rewards the sheep eternally. And I'm just trying to show that in a fundamentalist kind of religion, you find out a lot about your shadow. The beliefs you still hold on to. tell you a lot about what's still unmissionized in yourself. The places in the psyche that the missionaries never got to bring the good news. What is this good news? That we're here because of love and for love, and so is God. So, we're not trying to get rid of the shadow. We instead would like to make friends with it. That would be our pathway into integrating it. Integrate comes from the Latin word integer, which, as you know, means wholeness, like a whole number is an integer instead of a fraction. I want to be an integer, not all divided up. How would I do this? I would have to bring my positive and negative shadow side up into wholeness. Otherwise, I'm going to be like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I have split personality. Sometimes I'm the kindly doctor, and other times I'm the evil criminal. When you acknowledge that both are inside, then you would ask if there's some kind of befriending work or program that could help you bring these fractions into an integer. Well, with the positive shadow, it's I look at all those whom I admire or envy, and I ask myself if there's anything about them that's something like me. And I don't give up until I find something, shall we say, a common denominator. When I find this common denominator, I turn it into an affirmation. I start saying it out loud that this is true of me. I'll give an example. And then I start to act on it. So I'm doing an acknowledgement, an affirmation, and an action. So let's say I admire Bishop Tutu because instead of thinking of punishing all the white people who caused so much pain to his fellow black South Africans, he came up with a new plan, a reconciliation program whereby those who hurt others would admit and confess that they did this. The others would get the hearing from them of how much they suffered, and then amends would be made. He came up with this idea that you don't have to keep being enemies. You can find a way to reconcile. And we're not giving up until we do. So when I admire that style, reconciliation rather than revenge, restorative justice rather than retributive justice. When I noticed that, I could say, well, I want to acknowledge that I have that possibility in myself, say it out loud, and then start doing it with all my family and friends. and even join programs in which other people are doing it in larger circles. Now I am making friends with that one little part of my positive shadow. Negatively, same thing. Can't stand certain political figures, no names. And I'm acknowledging that what I dislike the most is the arrogant narcissism. But I'm going to have to say, David, at times you're arrogant. Now I'm going to admit that there must be some ways in which I'm arrogant and narcissistic, and I want to humbly ask for the grace of being free of that kind of a style and act humbly and selflessly. Arrogant, selfish, reverses, and this is easy to do since we're a combination of opposites. So every arrogant bone in our body has a corresponding bone of humility, and every narcissistic bone in our body has a corresponding bone of selflessness. So I'm going to act as if that were true of me. And that would be a way of befriending the negative shadow. I acknowledge, I admit, and I act as if. Act as if what? Act as if I can be the opposite of this. Or another way of doing it, instead of going to opposites, is to use the technique of what is the kernel, Kernel, of value, or the kernel of virtue that's hidden within the negative quality. Example, arrogance. But if someone is arrogant, it must be that somewhere in there they could have self-esteem. Self-esteem is the golden kernel hidden in arrogance. Narcissistic. Somewhere in there is I have the ability to take care of myself. I don't have to be a big shot. Instead, I could take the wonderful kernel of value in that narcissism and start being more like that. So when I act as if I am making friends with my negative dark side, I'm finding the creative energy in it when I look for the part of it that is helpful and that is useful. For instance, let's say someone's controlling. That's the negative shadow. You keep reacting strongly, you're triggered, you can't stand it when people are controlling, you start competing with them, you blame them, you name call them. Now we know, okay, turn that other finger toward yourself. But instead of just saying, I'm controlling, you would say, wait, in order to be a controlling person, you have to have a good sense of order. You have to be able to get things done. You have the ability to do coordinating. You can think of more than one thing at once. You might have leadership qualities. all of those are little golden kernels hidden inside the very negative experience of controlling. That's what's meant by find the creative energy in the negative. So we all have a dark side, but we don't have to be possessed by it. We can work with it, and it starts to upgrade our presence in the world so that we could be more like what was in our little opening affirmation. May I show all the love I have in any way I can. This is one way to show it. Questions about this part?
Can you break down revenge in the same way?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sense of justice. It's just that it's the primitive sense instead of the healthy sense.
I see.
Healthy sense of justice is restoration. Bishop Tutu, Anglican bishop, South Africa. Wait a minute, we don't have to get revenge against our oppressors. We can have another type of a program. We also heard it from Abraham Lincoln in his inaugural address. Something like, it was something to do with, the better angels of their nature will show them the light, something like that. In other words, he's trusting that, as well as when the war is over, they'll come around. They'll go with the idea of, everybody deserves to be free. They'll eventually see it. Francis?
Do you think that usually life has to get fairly painful before people deal with their shadow? Or do you think they can just learn about it and deal with their shadow?
Well, after our talk here, you guys are all ready to make a transformation. You don't have to wait till the suffering comes along, but you're right. Sometimes we have to go into a very dark place or a lot of suffering before we get it, that there is a dark side in us. I'm remembering that wonderful quote from Shakespeare's The Tempest, in which Prospero, the Duke, points to the, dark villainous character Caliban, and he says, "This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine." That, when I look at that, I'm seeing me. That takes a lot to say. Jude?
I think the whole thing with Job, he went through all the suffering, and at the end, he came out with twice as many wives, twice as many, more cattle, more ships, more land, more everything.
Yes.
Because he confronted his shadow through it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a story of actually confronting the shadow.
Yeah, that abundance comes to us when we do this kind of work.
We don't run away from it. They kept saying, curse God and die, and he kept saying, no. You get an excuse, you've got to work with it and deal with it.
Yeah. Vince?
I guess I had always kind of, in that iceberg analogy that you started with, of the consciousness and so much more beneath, I had thought of things coming above the waves maybe in a more magical and mystical way. And I think the phrase that comes to me when I see this is sort of fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
And I'm having a hard time reconciling, just going through the motions of embodying the positive and negative and seeing how that's going to bring those pieces and will them above the waterline.
It would never be just will or effort, because you're always asking for the grace to be able to do this when you have a spiritual consciousness. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's important in doing any psychological work, if you do have a spiritual orientation or program, to ask for the transformation to happen, trusting that there's a spirit that can give us the grace to bring it about. We put in the effort, the Holy Spirit brings the grace. Saint Teresa of Avila used a good example. She said, I love my garden and I really take care of it. When I water it, that's what I call effort. When it rains, that's what I call grace. God sends the rain, I do the watering. When it doesn't rain, we work together. Result, nice garden. It would be like that instead of, it's all about me.
Once you start doing shadow work, it keeps emerging. You're guided and you're led by it. The dreams emerge. You notice things with people. You notice situations. So you start on the journey, and it's a lifelong journey.
Shadow is only really dangerous when you project it and don't recognize it in yourself. Everybody else is like that, but not me. Thank God I'm not like other people.
What is, so I am not somebody who has maybe a spiritual program that thinks in those terms, so I'm not sure how to translate grace for myself.
It would be trusting that there's a gift dimension to life, that sometimes the wonderful things that happen, you didn't cause. They just came about by strange coincidence. The simplest example of synchronicity that applies to all people, no matter whether you're religious or not. It's that little moment when your mother met your father. They were not forced into it. Somehow they met. My mother told me how she met my father. Maybe your mother told you. Somehow they met. That was coincidence that led to you. So right away, from the beginning of who you are, there was already the gift dimension of life that brought those two people together. They may not have been the best parents that you ever could imagine. That doesn't matter. But they did get you here. So that you could have your chance with all the other billions of humans to make on this planet a kingdom of justice, peace, and love. Instead of injustice, war, and hate, which is the kind of world that the shadow produces. When it's unchecked and when people are possessed by it. So another final way of looking at this is that when you do admire someone, always, and I'll use a simple example, always let yourself go to the villain in the story. So I admire Luke Skywalker, but there's a Darth Vader in me. I admire Dorothy, but there's an evil witch in me. I admire the third pig who built his house out of bricks, but there's a big bad wolf in me, etc. Moses, born at a time when the Pharaoh had made a law. Kill all newborn Jewish boys because magicians have made a prophecy. There's a Jew coming along who is going to take away all your slaves. You won't be able to build your monuments. So he makes a law. Any boys born to Jewish parents are to be killed. Moses' mother breaks the law. Instead of turning him over, she puts him in a basket. She floats him down the river Nile. She sends her daughter Miriam. You walk along the bank of the river, and you keep your eye on the basket and make sure it stays safe and sound. He floats as far as the swimming area of the Pharaoh's sister, the princess. She sees the basket. She opens it up. She sees a cloth with Jewish symbology. She says to herself, this must be one of the little Jewish boys that's supposed to be killed. She sinks the little blanket into the Nile, and she adopts him, and she never lets him or anyone know of his origin. So she keeps him safe, and someday he will be Moses. That name in Egyptian means, I drew you out of the water. And he will be the one to fulfill the prophecy. Now, when you hear the story, you think, oh, the mother was admirable. She did an important protest against the law. The sister was admirable. She stayed right with watching the basket until it was safe and sound. The princess was admirable. She took on a little orphan that she didn't have to help at all. And of course, Moses is admirable because he took a stand for human freedom. But you left out the Pharaoh. That's in us too. There's something in us that fears we might lose and that makes us hurt others to make sure we don't lose. So if you were really working on befriending the shadow, you would embrace all the figures. Everybody get the concept? I'm a Darth Vader. I'm a sheriff of Nottingham. I'm a big bad wolf. I'm the Wicked Witch of the West, or whatever she was. It all has to be okay with me, and it becomes okay when I realize that, well, there is a program that I can work with that will not make me stay stuck in a dark place. There is a way to climb up into the light.
So, when we work on the negative shadow, when bringing this all into the light, does it continue to be a conscious effort, or is there some shift that it becomes
Automatic.
automatic?
Yes. So it starts with being effortful and awkward, and then it just becomes natural. But it'll only work if you can do battle against the central enemy, which is that great big ego that can't be wrong. That can't be bad.
What do you mean by battle?
A big battle with the egoic orientation that takes the arrogant, narcissistic stand. I'm not like other people. I don't have a dark side like that. I'm a big shot. I'm in charge. I'm in control. Any of those egoic beliefs, negative way of looking at the ego, big ego, inflated ego, that cancels out the work that we would do on ourselves, because it takes great humility to do this. So we're always keeping that in mind. So every time I work on letting go of my ego, that is, cultivate the wonderful virtue of humility, I'm moving in the direction of confronting and befriending my shadows. Let's have one last question and then we'll wind up.
I was just hoping you
Jake.
could just, yeah, I was hoping you could just expand a little bit more on the difference between acknowledging and then acting as if, because I've heard that, okay, if I acknowledge that I have a Darth Vader or a big bad wolf within me, that's admitting it and that's acknowledging it and that's another step, but then you also say the act as if, and I'm just curious, you might have already explained it.
What's the positive quality that Darth Vader has? I'm going to act as if that were true of me. He has the quality of acknowledging relationship, like to Luke, who is his actual son. To say Luke is the son of Darth Vader is to say Luke dressed all in white is not quite right. And Darth Vader all in black is not quite right either. That they are one and the same. Father, son, they're one and the same. So he has that quality. He has leadership quality. He has the quality of caring about his son and wanting his son to advance and so forth. So you're going to take whatever the positive sides are, and you're going to act as if those were true of you.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're acting as if the golden kernel inside the darkness, the diamond light that's inside would be activated. And all the negative features of the shadow are composed of some inner light that wants to come through. Snuffed out long ago. It waits for its moment. So Jesus says, this is your hour and the power of darkness. But he also says, Father, the time has come, glorify thy Son. So there's going to be a Holy Thursday, but there's going to be a Easter Sunday. It's not, there's always a silver lining. It's not a superstition. It's the tendency in the human psyche to move through cycles, as all of nature is doing, and continually to combine opposites. So you can trust that no matter how much darkness there is inside, there's the equal amount of light. But we're never going to get to the light until we say yes to the fact of darkness. We don't do its works, but we do notice its presence in ourselves. I like to end with a short poem by Edwin Markham. Kind of pulls it together. They drew a circle to shut me out, called me heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and brought them in.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.